Sometimes when you're driving down the road all by yourself, you begin to hear a voice that tells you need to look around, pay attention. Maybe something isn't quite right. That voice is me. It's the voice of Gord. G'day everybody, welcome to another episode of Voice of Gord. Been a little while. The content mines have been pretty quiet around here. I've been very busy with my personal life, my professional life, helping out my family, my in-laws. There's lots happening and I've been very busy. So I want to start off by apologizing for not releasing a podcast for the last couple of weeks. Any of y'all listening down under on the Australian On the Road radio network, don't blame Yogi or Mike. This is all my fault. I've been a little bit swamped over here in the north end of North America, but I've got plenty coming. I have 4 podcasts I'm sitting on that remain unedited, a whole bunch of writing work that's sitting in front of me, and no time to do any of it. It's coming, I promise you. We have more stuff coming to Autonomous Truckers. We have plenty more podcasts, some really important guests coming up. I have a lot of stuff coming to you in the month of August. So I want to thank you for your patience. I'm so sorry I haven't got anything out to you recently. Today's episode's a real good one. As people here in North America know, the American trucking market has been taking a bit of a wallop. Things are really slow. Companies are going out of business. We just saw the collapse of Yellow Freight. There's lots of small trucking companies selling off their trucks. Rates are in the toilet. Things are not looking good. Well, over and above all of this, we have an issue with scammers, double brokering, companies still bringing drivers here from other countries under indentured servitude arrangements, the suppression of rates. There's all kinds of bad stuff going on in the trucking market here, and I've assembled a group, a roundtable, to discuss these issues in detail and recommend ways that you, as a carrier, a driver, a broker, a shipper, ways to avoid falling into any of these scams or dealing with any of these scammers. So I won't hold you up any longer. You'll get intros to all my guests at the beginning of the show. So let's get to it. And again, thank you for being with autonomoustruckers.substack.com and with the Voice of Gord. Any comments, send them my way, gordylocks@protonmail.com. I'd love to hear from you, and you're going to be hearing lots from me in the next few weeks, man. I can't wait to get some of these shows to you. All right, let's get to it. G'day, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Voice of Gord. I'm Gord, and this is my voice. Got another roundtable here for you today with 4 other voices you're about to hear, and we're going to discuss a pretty important thing happening in the world of trucking and freight and logistics. I'm sure you guys have heard there's been lots of scammers out there and double brokering and crazy social media influencers trying to hustle money off the backs of hardworking truckers in America. And I've assembled a team to figure out exactly what's happening and to try and come up with solutions for it so that you, dear hardworking trucker, do not get scammed, nor your company, nor the legitimate good freight brokers which are out there. Joining me today, Ms. Clarissa Hawes, senior investigative reporter with FreightWaves.com, Justin Martin, social media manager at FreightWaves.com, Mike Lombard of the Lombard Trucking Podcast, who's joining us live from the CDL Life Turning Point Summit in St. Louis, Missouri, and Mr. Paul Bernard Jaroslawski of Freight Caviar joining us live all the way from Poland. Everybody, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. I'm actually in Kansas City, but close.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Kansas City. My apologies.
You're about 20 miles away from me.
Yeah, come through.
Right. So any of you who follow Freight Twitter or Trucker Talk, I guess, which is the lingo for TikTok, will probably be very well acquainted with Mr. Lombard. He recently got in a pretty big fight with this weirdo freight broker, social media hustler named G-Face. tell us tell us what you know about this G-Face character, how this all got started, what he's doing, the scams he's running, and then we'll go on to everybody else.
Yeah, so basically what happened was I had a friend of mine, not related into the trucking industry at all. He's somebody I know from back home in the Northeast. He sent me this video of this guy, G-Face. And this is back in, I want to say, March, April timeframe. And he goes, "Is this true?" And in the video, it shows G-Face on a couch, and he has a gold money counter on a table with like stacks of cash. And he goes, "All this money right here, this is clean money. I don't deal with dirty no money no more. I went to prison for that. This is all clean money. And so let me tell you about this trucking game." And he goes on and on. And then the first thing he says, he goes, "If you got $20,000, you need to go ahead and get your MC." And he essentially explains the whole process of activating your authority, get 2 trucks, hire drivers. And then he mentions also starting a brokerage. And in the video, and he also essentially describes the double brokering in that video as well. And so I got this video, and in the comments, there's no comments from drivers on there at all. There's nothing. And that I found shocking, because on TikTok, if you talk about anything trucking related, it shows up in driver algorithms. And this had none. This seemed to be in the algorithm of people who are focused on luxury cars and stuff like that, because it was people worshiping him. And so I kept following it. And then I was like, this guy's a fraud. He's a scammer. He's one of those course guys. I was like, I can't let this fly, because this is bad for the industry. Like, the market is tanking, fuel prices are record high. I was like, this is really bad. And so I had stitched a video where I essentially call this guy a fraud, explain why he's a fraud, because he doesn't mention this, he doesn't mention these parts of truck. Like, he doesn't get into like the nuts and bolts of trucking and like talk about details. He kind of just talks about it from like a flashy manner. And so 4 months went by, and he never engaged with it. And then I went live on TikTok during an evening walk to promote healthy living over the road. And I engaged with a kid on there who was asking me questions, and he went through my videos and saw it, and he had been following G-Face. And this is a kid who was interested in changing jobs in the trucking industry and thinking about becoming an owner operator. And so he's like, "Oh my God, I've been following this guy for a while, and I've been listening to what he's saying." So he tags G-Face in the video. And then in a matter of minutes, G-Face posted his response, and a whole bunch of people were in my DM saying, "Hey, G-Face responded to you. You need to go." And then that's when me and Justin, we started texting, and we were going on in the group chat, and then that video just drops, and Justin quick on his fingers, we both screen recorded the whole thing, because now, according to G-Face, he says that TikTok took it down, when in reality he 100% deleted it. And I would hope any of the listeners saw the video. If you didn't, essentially in the video, he makes a mockery of me, says I'm a fool, running around and stuff in my videos. He shows off his Lamborghini, a Maybach, a $1.5 million house, which, $1.5 million in California clearly doesn't get you much. It's a tough house for $1.5 million. And so he goes on, and then he brags about all the stuff he has, and then he willingly just says, "And hell yeah, I double broker." Because in my original video, I say at the end, I was like, "And he's double brokering." Like, I specifically mentioned that. And he goes, "Hell yeah, I double broker." And then he doubles down, and I teach all my clients to double broker. And then he talks about how he's double brokered to me. He gets into detail. He goes, "I've probably double brokered to you." He goes, "I know you're hurting for freight. Rates are bad." He goes, "Call me. I'll get you from LA to Florida for $7,000. I'm going to skim off the top because I'm double brokering, but it's going to be a full load partial, and you're going to go from LA to Florida, and, you'll probably get $5,000, but I'm going to skim $1,000 off the top." And yeah, he said, and then he refers to his clients, people who buy into his consulting, as and he teaches them to do the same thing, to start brokerages as well as start their own carriers, and essentially just do this whole game of double brokering. And then we went back and forth, and like I made a couple troll videos, because the thing is, he didn't tag me, but he made follow-on videos where he keeps mentioning haters. He goes, "The haters are going to die me. Haters like this Lombard guy," and he kept saying my name. And I'm not gonna lie, it like filled my ego like huge. It was not good for me. I was like, man, this guy. I was like, this like hot shot with chains and Lamborghinis, like he's got my name on his mind. And he goes, "These haters like Lombard trucking specifically." And I was like, and I played right off of that and made some troll videos back. And it's been a lot of fun. But boy, did that video make its rounds, especially on places like LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're on TikTok. I'm not, whatever. But you guys, you and Justin are sort of very social media savvy. Are there other people besides G-Face like that are doing this? Take my course to get into trucking. Take my course to get into brokering. Like, how widespread of a phenomenon is this?
You want to take that mic or me?
Yeah. Oh, I'll just take it off. But it's big, and I will say one thing: there is a guy out there who helps a lot of former felons get back in. His name's Bossman Brewster. He's somebody who I've seen who actually like helps people, trains them, does what you kind of describe with like training guys, teaching them how to use a grease gun and stuff like that. Really wants to get these guys in the industry to teach them a good work ethic. But other than that, there are a lot of people out there who, there's set up your own dispatching course. You could dispatch from anywhere in the world. Dispatchers, brokers, I'd say more so dispatching and brokering. Whereas on the trucking side of things, that game is kind of free out there. There's a podcast called Hauling Assets where that entire process is mapped out, especially the underwriting of it. But there still are people who will help you set up your MC, get all this stuff done. But it's really the brokerage and the dispatching side that I'd say that there's a lot of people selling this course or something that you could do where you can essentially, but also like from a trucking, but not even just starting a trucking company. There's a lot of people who sell you how to start a trucking company where all you do is lease on owner operators. That's another one where you just hire contractors as opposed to actually buying trucks and hiring drivers. That is another predatory one too, where they want you to start a carrier authority and then you lease on guys because it's just another way of, because you contract you negotiate a split of the gross of freight rates, and it's just a way for you to get a stream of revenue. And they're pitching this as the trucking industry, all of it as a form of passive income. There's a lot of these people. Just go on YouTube, you can find them.
Yeah, that's the biggest scam. I mean, not the biggest scam. There's a lot of scams, but one of the scams that really got me intrigued when I started seeing Instagram ads about automation, where some dude living in Miami who has all these fake followers and fake likes on Instagram is just selling you how to make money by just giving him money, and he puts a driver in there and you get passive income every month. I'm like, okay, like
I saw those ads.
I know exactly.
Yep, I know the exact ads you're talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about, because for me, like, I grew up in South Florida and I know what the trucking market is like down there. And whenever I see ads for guys like that, I'm like, oh, we can curse on this, right? This is your podcast. I'm like, they are so full of shit. Gord had a phrase I really liked, a rent-seeking behavior. And we see it everywhere in the trucking industry. And it's all guys that, like, if you just give me, 5 figures of cash, I can turn that into, 3 figures a week into your checking account forever. And it's never the case. Mm-hmm. What they're basically doing is it's like a combination of a Ponzi scheme where they need more people coming in to pay off the people that they already have roped in because they're not bringing enough money in, because the market's crashed. And that's kind of what's been so surprising to me is with how bad the market is. You would think that like all of these scammers would get flushed out and then moved on to something else. But in fact, it's kind of been the opposite. The harder that the trucking market's been, the more we see this kind of behavior.
I wonder if that, what you're noticing, this the refusal of the parasite to get off the host, even though the host is clearly on the floor and bleeding out, if that's like an indication that other potential hosts are also in equally bad footing, which is to say the wider economy kind of sucks and there's nowhere else for these people to go except to double down on the scam.
Yeah, so, no, that's a good way of putting it.
So I want to bring Clarissa into this. Just published a new article on this today at FreightWaves about another type of scam where people impersonate your MC number or somehow get your information and then start posting loads as brokers with your MC number instead of their own. Can you speak to this, Clarissa?
Sure. I interviewed a couple that this had happened to them after they had updated their MCS or MCS 150 on FMCSA Safer site. And, they had gone in, updated the mileage and other things that they were required to do. And then after like a month or so later, they were alerted that their through a site that monitors fraud activity, that they were engaging in double brokering behavior and not to do business with them. And then a driver. So then they reached out and like, what? They had no idea that their DOT number, their complete carrier profile had been stolen. And so they were, trying to, they said the driver was kind, and in a strange way, they were grateful to him to alert them within a 30-day time period of this occurring, of their identity being stolen. So, that they haven't heard from anybody else that may have been a victim of this, but, and so from the time they reported it, the FMCSA has put in place, because based on what they can find, and there really is no paper trail, because, what they have figured out is that somebody requested, a PIN number, a new PIN number, saying that it was lost or they had forgotten it, but then submitted the paperwork, the new MCS 150 paperwork manually, either through the mail or by fax. And so that's how, FMCSA employee entered the data, updated it, but the original company, there was no, due diligence on why they were doing this just a month or so after they had, legitimately done it. And then, so now that they're requiring, like carriers that are wanting to update, that are doing the manual process to provide their CDL license to prove that they are the owner of this DOT number. But now it's the fraudulent brokers have caught on to this. So now they're asking carriers who are doing this with the FMCSA now, they're asking carriers to provide their CDL number, license as well. And then they're ripping off their DOT number that way and posting, loads. So it's, and so it's like a difficult situation. It seems like whatever safeguard that FMCSA tries to put in place, the scammers are way ahead of them and already moved on.
So speaking of the FMCSA, one of their mandates is to, regulate the trucking industry and increase its safety. At least that's something they talk about ad nauseum, as most of the rest of regulators do. Safety. We live in a world of safetyism these days. That's a whole nother podcast. But is there a sense that like the FMCSA sort of like, do they get like how important this is? Like part of like safety and compliance is cost. And it's very difficult to maintain. It's expensive to maintain trucks and equipment and pay decent drivers. So like when all this money is being skimmed off the top by scammers, double brokering, these issues, that makes it more difficult for carriers to be in compliance and to actually operate safely. Like, does the FMCSA make that connection at all?
I think they're trying to, but it seems like, some of these issues, the double brokering situation has been around, since the beginning of trucking. If you talk to some original, not to this level of sophistication, but that this has always been an issue. But, definitely the age of online presence and all of that has ramped it to a new level. And so, but I think the FMCSA, by the time they hear, get, talk to all the stakeholders and involved, and everybody wants something different. Nobody agrees on exactly what should happen. But by the time they get something in place, it's too late. They're already moved on, to a new issue, and carriers are trying to keep up, remain compliant, and it costs money for them to do so. And so they definitely want to prevent, fraud from happening. But they just don't really, know, FMCSA has been their resource forever. And it seems like they're falling behind on some of these issues.
The scammers know that. The scammers know that the government and carriers can never keep up with the stuff because they know that nothing gets accomplished when it comes to transportation legislation. What's crazy is these scammers learned this from the cartels. There were migrants found at in San Antonio last year, over 50 people who were in a sweltering hot trailer. That DOT number, the cartels monitor trucks that go back and forth over the border. And they said, they know that year, make, model truck, DOT number, and they ghosted it. Now the scammers use technology to easily get away with it, and they know that nobody can keep up.
Yeah. And I also wanted to add, just because my co-host on the podcast, Bob, he owns a trucking company out of Charlotte. He had the same situation where someone called him in his office, and he's like you got to move your truck. Like your truck's parked at like on someone's private property. And he's like, where's the truck? And it was I think in Greensboro, North Carolina. And he's like, Bob's like, that's not my truck. Like, I don't have a truck there. And he's like, well, your MC's on the side of the door. He's like, come get it. And so Bob, out of curiosity, he's like, all right, I'm going to pull up. So he drove, I think it was a 3-hour drive or somewhat from where he was at. And he gets there and it's not his truck. It just has his MC on it. And he ended up the driver ended up coming, and he was telling him that he found this job off a Facebook ad a few weeks ago, and he hasn't even gotten paid from the company. And the company, the guy that actually got him the job, just went MIA. So he's not gonna so the driver got screwed from a Facebook ad. He got the job, and someone just defrauded his MC, and the guy just ended up making thousands of dollars and dipping. So you have to be very careful. Truck drivers have to be very careful before signing up to any trucking company, because even on top of that, you go to any truck. There's a lot of trucking companies that just lie to drivers about rates. They steal from them. So making sure that you're going to the right company is so important.
Right.
Yeah. So many problems that I see nowadays is people trying to interact with people that they don't know. If I'm a driver and I'm looking at loads from load boards, I don't know who's on the other end of that line. But the guys that I talk to that are doing pretty well right now, it's all guys that operate small, stay in their small lanes. They only talk with people that they trust.
Mm-hmm.
They only deal with people that refer them from people that they know.
Yep.
So you relying on the government to try and fix any of this stuff it's like trying to swat a fly with the Titanic. It's just it's an impossible task.
Right. And PBJ, as I understand it, in your capacity, so you've been in the freight market and in logistics for how long now? I think you have quite a history in the business.
So I became a freight broker straight out of college in 2015, and I was brokering freight until 2021. And then I started doing Freight Caviar and got away from the freight broker world.
Right. And so for people who may not know, and I doubt there's anybody who hasn't heard of Freight Caviar yet, can you give us a brief description of what Freight Caviar is all about?
So Freight Caviar started with just making memes, freight memes, freight broker memes specifically, and kind of took off on Instagram. And then I decided to go on LinkedIn and also Twitter. And after the freight broker memes started doing well, I decided to also introduce a newsletter and a podcast. And so we do kind of just news and entertainment. We actually source a lot of information from FreightWaves. Just kind of give you the snippet of what's going on in the industry. So we just trying to keep it lighthearted, but also informative and entertaining. Since we all know there's a lot of, stressful situations that occur in this industry that could be, you could create funny content just to kind of make it less stressful. I know a lot of people when they're working the freight broker jobs or being in the trucking industry are dealing with a lot of stressful situations, and getting some humor out of that just takes, some of the
takes the edge off a little bit.
Exactly.
And speaking of stressful situations, I understand you're located in Poland. You took this job in the Ukraine for a little while.
Yeah.
But you're also operating kind of as a digital / IRL vigilante of sorts, trying to chase down double brokers who are located near you in Eastern Europe. Maybe you can tell us some stuff about that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty funny. I built up this audience on Instagram, and with Instagram, you could see the analytics, demographics of your audience. And so the United States is number one at 65%. 65% of my audience lives in America. And then right after that is Armenia. Armenia, like it's about 6% of my audience. And I knew this when I was a broker. Like we wouldn't work, like we use Carrier 411 basically because there's a lot of double brokers calling in to get loads. And whenever you'd see on Carrier 401 that the last name ends in YAN, which is an Armenian last name, and this has nothing to do with racism or anything like that, because people have called me racist because of this, but it's like I just wouldn't work with them because the chances are 80% of the time they're going to double broker the load. And this was before like the scams started like evolving. This was back like in 2019, 2018, 2020, where they were essentially just double brokering. I still don't want to double my load double brokered.
Dude, it's not racism, it's pattern recognition.
Yeah, exactly. And so like I just had this crazy idea. I'm like, well, I'm gonna go visit Armenia. Like let's see what's going on in Armenia, because everyone seems to be double brokering from Armenia. And that's not to say that doesn't happen in Ukraine, because in Ukraine there's also a lot of Landstar agencies that double broker loads. So I mean, besides the fact that I ended up flying to Armenia in November of 2021, and I posted a story on my Instagram, and I just got flooded with DMs like, oh, you got to come visit our double brokering office. We'll show you everything. And, you know, I just got like all these DMs, and I'm like, okay, I'll just select one of these DMs. So I picked one, and I ended up meeting up with these two guys. And, you know, like when you get to meet these guys, like first of all, like one of them just came back from the war against Azerbaijan. You know, they're really tough situation. Their parents probably make a couple $100 a month. Really just like, they're poor people, very poor. But they're also very kind, like hospitable. When you go, if any of you were to go to Armenia, you would realize that they're very hospitable people. If you go there, if you're a guest, they'll take care of you. The food's on them. Like I got picked up from the airport by double brokers. And like, so, you know, I got this kind of personal relationship with them. But so nonetheless, after about 5 hours of hanging out with them, just kind of talking, I took my videographer with me. So we were recording interviews. We had all this great content, really like understanding why there's so many double brokers in Armenia, like what they do. And the double brokers I worked with are the ones that weren't scamming people. They were actually paying the trucking companies. They literally had 0 freight guards on their MC, and they were like really like hesitant of taking me to the office because they didn't want to know which MC it was. But nonetheless, after 5 hours, they're like, okay, Paul, we'll show you the office that you know we operate from. And it was in this old Soviet building. You walk in, it's actually, so most of the building was a university, like an Armenian university. And there's just like, they rented out like one room out of that university. It's like just like a Soviet building. I walk in, you walk into the building, and it looks like a regular double brokering office. You have like the 4 time zones and 4 clocks on the wall. Everyone has 3 monitors. You know, they have DAT pulled up, Carrier 411 pulled up. They have the phone number. They have the phone on their desk, and everything seems like it'd just be a regular brokerage. And then like, you know, I get to know some of them, and they're like, yeah, like we have a relationship with TQL, or we have a relationship with CH Robinson. And like the people that I talk to, they're just like young guys, like, you know, our age, just kind of like, they seem so like normal. Like, you know, if they grew up in America, they'd be like one of us kind of thing. They just were born and raised in Armenia. And like, we ended up filming all this content. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, after a few beers, I'm like, guys, do you mind if I go on Instagram Live? Ended up going on Instagram Live, which was the biggest mistake we made, because 5 minutes after that, there were 6 dudes just stormed the building. And these were, you could just tell, like, these were not like people you want to hang around with. And the one of them started beating up the guy that brought us to the office, screaming and yelling. They made me delete all my memes making fun of double brokers from Armenia. And then they ended up taking us to a cafe and talking to us for 5 hours, saying that they're better than brokers. They treat drivers better, yada, yada, yada. You know, like they literally, they take this propaganda and they instill it in all these trainees and then the new hires they make. And literally these double brokers, like they're trained in the system where like brokers are bad, double brokers actually are the good people. They treat drivers better. Even though like, yeah, like this was back in November of 2021. And like, they were actually complaining to me about the scammers that like don't pay the truck driver, because they're like, we pay every truck driver, but you know, I still don't know that how true it is. But so I got in trouble, and it was definitely like one of the more frightening situations I've been in. They ended up taking me to a cafe. buying me like fruit and I don't know, like drinks and stuff. But it was a 5 hour long conversation with them about this stuff. So
Did you get a sense? Did you get a sense of like how big how big their operation was? Like how many loads they were moving a day or a week or whatever?
So it's been like drastically expanding ever since it started. But like someone told me there's a double brokering office on every corner of Yerevan, the capital. And what was crazy was when I went into because they drove, I went in their car in the back seat. The guy had a plastic bag filled with passports. So I don't know what that has to do, but he was like, let me move that out of the way, and like he just moves his plastic bag of passports. Passports.
I made a joke the other day. Like Lombard had a post on LinkedIn about double brokering and stuff, and I don't know how I came up with this idea, but as just a joke, I said, "Here's how you solve double brokering: all brokers in America must have TWIC cards." And like I just said it as a joke, but then like as you kind of like let it sink in, like it just makes more sense now. Like all of this would go away tomorrow if brokers had to have TWIC cards.
And it's 100% true. I used to have a TWIC card. I'm sure Lombard still has one. Like you have to go and deal with a United States federal government agency at a port facility or at some contractor's office. You come, fingerprints, they go through all of your paperwork, your citizenship papers, your birth certificates, all your ID. There's like multiple layers of checking. It's actually quite a process and takes a while. And that confirms that you are here in the United States. You are a transport worker. You are legit. You're actually doing the work. And no such system exists for all these brokers or dispatch services who are all over the world. They're in the Ukraine, they're in Armenia, they're in Pakistan. And it's like, you know, I want to, one of the reasons I brought all you guys here is like, I want to zoom out about this. And again, you know, it's not pattern recognition, bro. But like, there's this problem with, you know, and some sort of dissident thinking type people I follow describe it as America being used as an ATM.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's people that just show up, they stick in a card, they take money, and then they leave. So that ATM meme, as it were, takes on a few forms. Some of it's these double brokering offices and dispatch services. Some of it is like actually semi-legitimate. There are trucking companies who, for whatever reason, can't get people to do basic administrative stuff for them. So they hire somebody in the Philippines or somebody in Colombia, and they're like sending money that could be circulating in our economy out of the country. You know, I'm not going to sit here and argue and be like, oh, that's bad, you should always hire Americans, although you probably should. But like the ATM part of it, like we have a problem right now in freight, in trucking. We're over capacity. You know, people can't make their payments. Companies are going out of business. Companies are selling their trucks. And these guys are like, I'm just going to sit in Armenia and take $200 a load out of the pockets of the people actually doing the work.
Yeah.
And, you know, far be it for me to be like all hyper nationalist or whatever, but like that, all that economic activity, the actual material reality happens here. The cost of living for the driver, the people that own the truck, is here. It's not in Armenia. It's not in Colombia. It's not in the Philippines. It's not in Pakistan. And the cost of living here is becoming astronomical. And then there's the devaluation of the dollar, inflation of the cost of everything. And all of this money is like exiting the country for work being done by people in the country. Like it's just at some level, it's wrong. Like, am I wrong here?
It's usury. It's what it is. That's why I titled one of my podcast episodes that the U.S. supply chain has been compromised. Like in no other way, you know, this doesn't exist anywhere else. Like like the industry, people's other countries, Europe's supply chains, I'm sure are gate kept from this type of stuff, and also aren't as robust and probably aren't as deregulated as it is in the United States. I mean, it's the American people are being defrauded. And I used this reference where essentially like people didn't really notice it probably, you know, it started coming to light in 2019, but then there was a huge spike and everything was going really great. So it was ignored. But now that the economy is so bad, it's like the water in Lake Mead, they're finding the bodies and the boats that, you know, that the mafia.
Great analogy.
Yeah, the freight's dried up. So now you're starting to see all the like there's so many dead bodies around here, and they're like, oh my God, what's going on? Like you're seeing the only people winning. We just had a 100-year-old company. Now, granted, they made bad decisions. They had a 100-year-old company go bankrupt. Like people who are doing very well, running very good businesses of 10, 20 trucks are going bankrupt daily. Carriers, filing for bankruptcy that were doing well, having good books of clients, and now they're being run off the road by these systems going on, by like literal office spaces. Like if I'm a US senator or congressman and I'm listening to the show right now and I hear that there are office buildings that are legitimately defrauding US businesses, these are US manufacturers, shippers, not just talking and motor carriers who are being ripped off. I'm literally ripping my hair out because to me that's a national security threat. Like that's what it sounds like overall.
I'm just trying to imagine like a trucking company in Japan being defrauded by like a double broker in Germany with like a finance office in Pakistan somewhere. Like swapping countries around just makes it sound completely foreign. But as long as it's like happening to countries in the US by outside countries, it's like, okay, that's just the price of doing business.
So funny enough, I heard from a freight broker in Poland. He operates in the EU market, and he was telling me that there's a lot of Polish double brokers in the EU market. They don't do the scams where they don't pay the trucking companies, but they just double broker. And they have their own load board. I forgot what it's called, but they have their own load board. And so it does actually happen in Poland as well. And in the EU overall, maybe not the scams as such, but the double brokering from like a point of view where they'll sell it and then they'll just take like whatever 200 euros off the load and resell it happens all the time here too.
It plays, and I mentioned this too, and this isn't, and kind of like, and this isn't racism either. This is patterns, but a lot of these old Soviet bloc countries are built. That's how some of their cultures are. Some of their cultures and politics is built off of bribery, like bribing people and paying people off, and fraud is literally like that's business as usual. Like so places like Armenia, old Soviet nations, like that's just how their history's always been. They're like, well, that's how it's always been. So it's like them doing it to the US is just like, it's really no sweat off their back. There's no conscience in it.
Yeah. Right. And doing business for a while. So Clarissa, I wanted to bring you in. You've been doing investigative journalism and trucking for how many years now?
16 years.
Wow.
I've covered it's like this new name, same game scenario where, I mean, they've gotten smarter and more tech savvy, but kind of the same, situation over and over again. I keep wanting, it to change, like that this will be the time when, it hits home and actual changes are made. But I have a similar, not the same experience as Freight Caviar has had, but I posted a series highlighting some of the business practices of the Glendale gang is what they call them, or and the one of the founders, Steve Vetyan, if that's how you pronounce it. I had a few conversations with him, and I think I published my series in July of 2021, and where, he just laughed at me, kind of like he answered the phone, and which I was really surprised. And we chatted a couple times for hours, and he was, at first he denied that he was who I thought he was, and said he was a different Steve, and that he didn't have any, ties to trucking or double brokering scheme, and that he didn't know of them, but he had no involvement. But then when I lowballed the number of millions, that of dollars that his team had allegedly double brokered, from trucking companies, then he totally outed himself and said, no, that is not correct. It's
much bigger number, number.
and so he's like, some people are saying 100 million. I can tell you it's 400 or 500 million, and so after my series ran, I started getting robocalls, like just from different numbers. It would just like ring and ring and ring, like, and then I would try to block that number, and then I would start getting calls again. And so
Wow.
that went on for a while. But I definitely have, I'm filing away different parts for another series. By the time you find all the paperwork that you need on one company, they've already shut that down and moved on, and started another one. So it's like the constant, and I'm a one person band, doing this. And so it's, I am the investigative team at FreightWaves. And so it's, all these stories that I want to finish, that I need to finish, but something urgent, gets in front of that one. But definitely, that was one of the most interesting articles. And then I did have some former employees that shared the training videos on, we want to bring in, and the sad part of it is the fact that they prey upon their own people, like they bring them over, like maybe in their country they make $350 a year driving a truck or something, and they bring them here with promises of you can make $4,000 or $5,000 a month, and then they bring them over on visas and train them where originally they don't even know that this is wrong. If you learn this system and you don't know, you work for another trucking company or a brokerage, you don't know that this is not correct. And so, there's, and some of these ex-employees that have left, they still look over their shoulders because, they fear retaliation and that, who has talked, and so, some were so brave to come forward, but I still think that, there's really no way out, for some that came over thinking for a better life, wanting to support their family, send money back home, and then found themselves in a position that they didn't realize it was, they were sold a bill of goods that wasn't what it was, what they expected it to be. And then
Indentured
they're
servitude.
Yeah, that's a good phrase, Mike. It is. And there's programs that, so speaking of investigative journalism, there's an article I have shared a gazillion times now because I'm just aghast that nothing's been done because of it. In 2019, Canada's biggest newspaper, our equivalent of the New York Times, they're called the Globe and Mail. They did a deep dive, female investigative reporter, and she was looking into these indentured servitude arrangements being used in the trucking industry in Canada. Most of it was focused in Vancouver with guys from India. So people in the Hindu and Punjabi Sikh communities based in Vancouver, and they advertise in India. They have like billboards in India saying, we will help you come to Canada and we'll get you jobs driving truck. And then we eventually bring the rest of your family over. It's a whole thing. This whole like India, Canada,
oh yes, I followed it.
Migration thing is crazy. And so what ends up happening is these guys come to Vancouver, they get off the plane. They've never been to Canada. Even though English is a very dominant language in India, many of them still don't speak English because they come from some little village in the middle of nowhere. Nobody ever taught them English. They still don't speak English. They get to Canada, and the guy who brought them there has like an immigration consulting service. That immigration consulting service uses a program through the British Columbia provincial government to bring truck drivers because the BC government has been listening to the same garbage the ATA has been putting out, but up north about the driver shortage, which is baloney. We all know it's baloney, but the government still believes it. So these guys will bring in a driver from India. Well, they're not a driver. They're a peasant. They don't know how to drive yet. They come to Canada. So the guy that owns the immigration service, his cousin or brother, or maybe himself, owns a small truck driving school that does the bare minimum. It's like 2 weeks, get your BC class 1, you're on the road. Does somebody learn English in 2 weeks? Does somebody learn how to navigate the Rocky Mountains in an 80,000 pound vehicle? Or worse yet, a Super B train, because in Canada we have way heavier, longer trucks. And so this investigation takes place, and it's been sitting there for 4 years. The feds have done nothing about it. Nothing. And what really annoys me is you'll get people like Justin Trudeau and other politicians. They're always going on about human trafficking, human trafficking. We have to stop human trafficking. This is the abuse of girls and young women and all that. And like a lot of that's true. I'm not denying that. But like, here is a story about humans being trafficked from India to Canada to work a very hard job. And then they can't get out of it because if they object or say, I don't know how to drive, how do you get to Toronto? You know, how do I put tire chains on my truck to go over the Rocky Mountains in the winter? If they complain too much, the guy who brought them there just says, hey, dude, you can go back to India tomorrow. I'll just take your visa. What do you want to do? So there's these guys who are locked into these agreements and literally driving truck near as slaves in Canada. And there was another article that came out through this other alternative media magazine in Canada a little while ago about how the Ontario provincial government wants to increase the number of immigrants, women, people of color, minorities, gender non-conforming people. Hey, y'all come get your truck license and the Ontario government will pay for it for you, right? And one of the counter examples they showed was that according to the statistics, 56%, or was it 54? It was in the mid 50s of trucking companies based in Toronto are already owned by Punjabis. Like they've already taken over half the trucking business in Canada's biggest city. And it's the same in Vancouver. So the government's saying, well, we have to bring in more migrants and people of color and get all these people involved in the trucking business because apparently there's a shortage, not realizing that like the Indians are already way ahead of them, much like the scammers are always ahead of the government. Like the Indians are like, no, we're just going to bring our own people in, pay them wages that are like in between Canada and India. The guys we brought over are happy. We're scamming and making tons of money. And to hell with the locals. We're just going to take your industry. Thanks.
And it suppresses the wages. That's the thing. It's overall what it does is it's under the guise of trying to look as though they're welcoming diversity. And that's one of the coolest parts about trucking. It's like, I love meeting people from all walks of life. I made a whole video about that. The people you meet and, traveling the lower 48, you meet the real people who run this country, but it just, all it really does is it suppresses wages. So that way people can maximize their profit margins. And these same practices are going on at every U.S. port. Like this form of indentured servitude with not so much Indians, but people from East Africa and other parts of Eastern Europe. The Chicago, there's a stereotype of the Chicago-based carrier. I'm sure PBJ knows what a Chicago-based carrier is, and those people are doing the same things. I had a gentleman on my show who was abandoned by a Ukrainian carrier owner who never paid him, and then eventually, the kid took the truck home, and then the federal government seized the truck because the guy left the country.
Yeah, and it's not just the ports. I had no idea that I was stumbling upon this too. When I was in the Postal Service, I kind of noticed in 2019, 2020, I would see black and white Volvos at our sorting facility all the time. No markings, no DOT numbers, no nothing on them. They were basically just brand new Volvos straight off the line. It would be some like Russian dude in like his early 20s behind the wheel, terrified out of his mind, completely lost, had no idea where he was. He would like kind of grunt at me and like point on his phone, like, how do I get to this spot? And I'm like, oh man, you are. And I was mad because I thought that these guys were coming in on their own volition, wanting to like make their money and be truck drivers. I had no idea that many of these guys were like trafficked over here by like family members or, scumbag relatives that were basically lying to them. Other examples I've had, like I've had people reach out to me on TikTok saying that like in California, there's a huge scam going on with, like, I haven't been able to verify any of this. Clarissa, maybe if you want to like find another gold nugget to dig for, look into this. But they're telling me that the DMV in California is just completely full of these like Punjabi driver scams where they'll like, they know a guy and they'll just rubber stamp their CDL and then put them right in the truck and away they go.
Matthew Crawford, my favorite philosopher, did an article on this. I can't remember. It might have been Unheard or this UK-based magazine where he described how he had heard about these scams. And then there's other ones with the California DMV is like totally compromised, right?
Yeah.
So the point of his article was that, like, how do administrative functions work in a one-party state, right? Because the Republicans that basically don't exist in California, and we've had all this trouble with COVID. And so the premise was, what goes on when there's no accountability via the electoral political process, and like one crew is running everything. And one of the most corrupt institutions within the California state government is the DMV. And so he has this motorbike that requires some kind of like clean bill of health for emissions, because California has all these crazy emissions laws. And he goes to the DMV and sits in the parking lot, and like you call some phone number, and a little Chinese lady comes along and like takes the registration for his bike, disappears, comes back and gives him like a legitimate emission certificate for his bike, but like he never did the testing, he never submitted anything, never took it to a shop, and then he just drives away. And so he goes through this experience and then starts digging and finds out like certain DMVs have given out hundreds of CDLs where nobody actually ever took a road test.
Yeah.
The guy shows up, yeah, and like we're all going on about like road safety, and we want people to know what they're doing when they're driving a truck. And the California DMV is like handing out free CDLs like candy, and there's no accountability for it because the state's run by one party that clearly doesn't care.
Yeah.
And friends of mine will say, we need inboard facing cameras. We need speed limiters. Like friends of mine, like, I call them civilians at this point, like, like because they're like non-veterans. Like friends of mine, they'll be like, just got cut. They always call out when they get cut off. They're like, just got cut off by a truck driver. Just saw this, just saw that happen. They definitely need cameras. And they do it kind of to troll me, but they truly mean it because they're like, they're so bad. And it's just, but meanwhile, I try and tell them, I'm like, you have no idea who's getting CDLs now. I was like, you don't know what's going on. They're like, that can't be true.
There's a CDL school in Southern Arizona. They were featured by like their local news outlet. And you see this all the time where the local ABC affiliate sends a junior producer out there to shoot some B-roll with a CDL school saying like, oh, this trucking school is solving the truck driver shortage. And what kind of, you see like a dozen of these every week, and like whatever, I just kind of ignore them. But this one in particular really kind of like set off my red flag, because they were taking people with zero English language speaking ability and training them to get their CDLs. And I said, well, and I blasted them. I went on Twitter and I called them up publicly, I tagged them, I said everything. It's like, guys, you have to be able to communicate in English in order to get a CDL in America. Like, what are you doing differently? And they're like, oh, we do like a 2-week crash course on teaching them how to speak English. And I said, okay, you don't understand. Like, barriers to entry are good and necessary. Well, why would you in your right mind want your family on the road with anyone like this? And they kind of like, they had nothing to say with that. And like a different account of theirs came in and replied to me, and they said, well, we believe that anybody who wants their CDL from any country should go ahead and get one. And we're also bringing in, and this is what kind of like, I knew that they were lying to me on this, because they said, we're bringing in truck drivers from other countries to do this. And I was like, no, you're not. You're like Gord called it perfectly. You're bringing in other countries' peasants here and making them truck drivers here. And a lot of it's like, against their will. And they gave me their phone number, and I kind of left it at that. I really should have followed up on that.
I don't believe many people are going against the rule in America, just because I know from people here in like Eastern Europe, everyone wants to go to America, and like they'll go to America even if it's like a shitty job being a truck driver, and maybe like the pay is worse than it is, but like everyone wants to go to America at the end of the day.
Well, yeah, when I say against their will, I'm saying they're not given like the full picture. They're being told, come to America because you're going to be making X, Y, and Z. But I promise you, if they were honest with what they'd be making, a lot less would want to come in the first place. Maybe
at the same time, getting to America is like the main obstacle. Once they get into America, they know they could, maybe they could work there for a few years and then go somewhere else. But I know a truck driver that like he was a truck driver in, I think, Norway, but he was from Poland. And then when he got a visa to become a truck driver for a Polish trucking company in Chicago. And I mean, he loves it. He's posting all these videos, and he's a great driver. He had experience through all like the mountains in Norway and all that. So like he came to the US and he's loving it. So
Yeah, when I was at the Postal Service, I worked with guys from like every corner of the globe that moved here,
yeah.
became American citizens, and then because you have to be a postal worker. But none of them were truck drivers in their home countries. They were doctors, lawyers,
Yeah.
clerks, you name it. I mean,
Yeah.
they came from all walks of life. I never met a truck driver from overseas that came here and became a truck driver.
But
Okay.
the guy PBJ knows just said like this guy was an experienced professional, driven in Europe, and it's like that's like if I was to, I could never imagine what it would be like if I was to just show up in a place like Ukraine tomorrow and drive their trucks. Even though I've been driving the U.S. to show up in Ukraine or Poland or Russia and to just drive their trucks. Like, I don't know if I can, that's a high level of stress. I don't know if I can do. And that's happening right now in the US.
I used to go to Canada all the time. And I was like, it was fine when you're in like Ontario because, half the signs are in English and French. But when I went to Quebec for 3 days, everything's French.
Right. So we've identified all these various problems. So we've got double brokers in Armenia or wherever, foreign dispatch services, people in Glendale and California. There's Chicago mafia. There's these indentured servitude arrangements. The FMCSA is behind the ball. Maybe they're doing something. Maybe they aren't. Let's talk solutions for the end of the show here. What could we do? What advice could we give to carriers, brokers, truckers, shippers? How do we make suggestions that prevent people from getting tied up with these dodgy operators? What are questions they could ask when dealing with somebody on the phone? What are things they could look for when they're looking online besides just an MC number? Like, what are practical things people can do to avoid these scams and to sort of like put them out of business by not using them?
Do I know this person? Have I worked with them in the past? Have anyone that I had direct relationships with used this person as well? If you can't answer yes to all three of those questions, lose my number.
And I think as well is that, oftentimes the drivers, are, running their operations from behind the wheel, like, they don't have a home off, some have somebody, that's handling, I'm thinking more about the owner operators. They may have somebody at home that, is running the day-to-day booking loads, doing kind of the due diligence that needs to happen. But if you're, a one truck operator and doing this from the road, you can have as many, of these apps, spend thousands of dollars on all these different, protection safeguards, but still, they are trying to do this, after driving and calling around. And so then people are like, well, how did they fall for this? But, it's a lot of stress in just driving and then, like running your business, from your cab and everything. And so, there has to be some kind of unified system that makes it easier instead of having to subscribe to all these different services, that, a lot of them get the free option, but, they could see more information about a carrier if they update or a broker if they upgrade to a different one. And so, they're trying to, cover their bases, but, they're still falling through, a lot of it's falling through the cracks and they're becoming targets.
Yeah. Like what I would add to that is for any driver listening, like if it's too good to be true on a rate, like it's too good to be true. Like there's so many scams going on where like a driver or dispatcher is like, oh, wow, I booked this load for $5,500. And then it turns out like, it's a scammer that was never planning on paying them. So they obviously threw any rate to get them on the load. And like, so just be mindful of that. And then always look at email addresses to make sure that the endings of the email addresses actually are the main websites of the brokerage. Just because nowadays they're if it's ABC brokerage.com is like the official email address, and they'll do abcbrokerages.com or abcbrokerage.net. Just make sure that the ending of the email address is always the correct email address ending, and you could check that out, I think, on FMCSA or Carrier 411. And then don't trust anyone until they've proven themselves. So if you're working with someone new, do all your due diligence, phone number check, email check, and then once maybe they've proven themselves, you could kind of not really have to double check again on them. Well, you should still be double checking, but overall, those are just a few pointers I would have.
Yeah, I think when it comes to fixing this issue, it's funny going back to your article from a few years ago, Clarissa, where you talk about the all-state solutions. You mentioned in there how the DAT, a representative from the DAT load board, said that they take this issue very seriously. Now, you wrote this article, I believe the date was June 18th, 2021. And clearly, so the FMCSA, they don't care because they're not doing anything and they're just unelected lawyers who only listen to the ATA and whoever has money. But even DAT doesn't take this issue seriously because you have a company like Truck Smarter that's already vetting carriers and vetting who they let on their platform. And they've been a load board for, a cup of coffee. So DAT doesn't care at all. Anyway, so I think that the number one thing, especially carriers can do to solve this, and I'm parroting, a friend of the show, Reed, who has lost freight, is leaning on your relationships. If you've been a carrier for 5 years, 10 years, you've probably met a bunch of brokers. Who'd you have good experiences with? Lean on those people, like those relationships, the shippers you dealt with. Like it's gonna come down to it's a grassroots effort to really start any sort of change. It's got to start at the grassroots level of you, the carrier, kind of having to vet these for yourself. Too good to be true, because that's the thing. There are too good to be trues out there. I've seen them, especially when I was running heavy off the spot last year, and it's just. You have to be mindful. Yeah, you have to read the emails. That's the thing. Just like because these phishing scams are attack corporate offices a lot. My wife at her job is always getting the don't open this email, don't like the warnings of and they'll change the rhetoric around. They'll switch 2 letters of the company name. All those little things. It takes an eagle eye. So like if you are if you're going to be booked, if you're a carrier and you're looking for your next load or anything, be parked, be pulled over, and be in the right state of mind to be doing this. I know you want to just run and gun and you need that next load because you want to feed your family, but it's just, it could wind up in a disaster.
Hey, I got a question. I don't know if you guys are the right folks to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway because, I think I'm older than everybody here. I remember, I'm just going to share an anecdote. I was at a steel warehouse in Detroit a long time ago, unloading a load of coils. Big warehouse, lots of different trucking companies coming and going. And this guy showed up as a representative for a carrier, had their jacket, their hat on, business cards, just wanted to check in. He's like, hey, how's it going? How's business? We brought you guys a few loads last week. How's truck turnaround going? Like, just talk to the guys that own the warehouse. Like, we're all standing around at the office. The drivers were all waiting to get unloaded. And this guy came in and shot the breeze, and he was legit. Like, he was a traveling, not a salesman, but like a representative of an actual carrier who went and met the facility that his trucks were going to and met with the guy that's handling his customers' steel, right? Like, I know it might sound quaint, but in this day of like everything's digital, everything's done on the phone or via the internet, like are there still carriers and brokers who have human reps that actually travel around and do that? Because like if you meet a representative that's an actual person that's like you can attach to this name on the computer and someone that's actually dealing, like the human touch, as it were, like how practical is it to request more of that out of the people you're dealing with rather than having to go through all this, digital eagle eye watching?
No, it's amazing. I actually, it's funny you bring this up because back in April, me and my co-host of the podcast, we actually ended up going, he's got a trucking company in North Carolina, and he was trying to get away from brokerages, and he's in an like industrial area, his office is at, and he's got shippers all around him. And we're like, let's just start walking to these shippers and, giving your business card and just seeing if they need help. And we went to 5 shippers, and 2 of them gave them, like, we started a conversation and they're like, okay, here's my email, here's my phone number, tell me more about what you do and maybe we could line something up. And so if anyone would want to do that, just have a business card and have like some kind of pamphlet where like it gives you kind of like information about your company. What are you kind of specializing in? What kind of lanes would you run? How many trailers and trucks do you have? But it's very powerful because that personal, I guess, like a factor just going there adds a lot. You know, it's like when you're doing business with anyone, meeting in person is vital, or it just helps a lot. So definitely, I think it's great to do, and I think ever since COVID, people kind of forgot to do that, but people should definitely look into it.
Right.
Yeah, the thing you said about the work uniform, that's going to be interesting to me. Is that I think will be like a next new scam. We were always told, like when I was at the post office, like do not throw away your uniforms. If you have one, you're not going to use it anymore. Burn it, because you have guys that will. You as a civilian, you cannot go online and buy the postal uniform. You have to like use a government credit card and goes through like a whole process and everything. So when I quit the post office, I donated all of my uniforms back to my office so like new guys could wear them. And I think that's going to be like a big scam is guys wearing uniforms for trying to represent company XYZ and saying, hey, you know, we'll take your loads here. You know, here's my business card. And then boom, now they're double brokered.
Right. Something else I wanted to touch on briefly, getting back to something Mike said and our friend Reed, you know, about having information and, you know, having a good website. So I want to take it from like us vetting brokers and shippers vetting brokers and then turning it around back to vetting carriers. So, something Reed mentioned that's really very important is like having a website and having all this information available. So like if you've got like current pictures of your equipment, what kind of trucks and trailers you have, advertise the lanes, advertise the specialization, what markets you service. And, you know, something I mentioned in the chat that I think is an interesting phenomenon that could apply to trucking is you go to a coffee shop, right? You go to sort of one of these kind of like, you know, lefty, progressive, fancy coffee shops, not necessarily Starbucks, but a lot of your local independent ones. And they're all about like, here's pictures of the farmers that grow our coffee beans. And this is the fair trade practice arrangement we have with them. And they really pump that stuff up. And their customers eat it up. Like, yeah, man, I'm getting this awesome shade grown coffee from Guatemala. And I can see a picture of the guy who grew it. And like, they feel this connection. Like, do that with truck drivers, man. Like if you're a carrier, you should have a bunch of driver profiles. Hey, you know, this is Justin. He's worked for us for 15 years. He's got no tickets. He's never been in an accident. You know, his dad was a farmer, whatever, and just have like driver profiles and like have a human connection to this. So it's not just like a name on a load board, you know, it's some guy's MC number you have to chase down, like actually see the people who are hauling your freight. And then that way you can sort of like help eliminate the, you know, all the people we know and love driving around in beat up Volvos with fairings hanging off and Illinois license plates, and the driver may or may not speak English and may or may not be here legally. Like we can eliminate some of that stuff by like going to, you know, lefty coffee shop model of having profiles of the people doing the work. Like
I'm on the FreightWaves website right now, and you know, not saying FreightWaves is illegitimate, but I mean, I can go to your About Us, and there's a profile about Clarissa. So if I'm curious, if I'm skeptical of FreightWaves media reporting, if I think they're saying anything that's fake news or they're uncredentialed, I can go here and I can read Greg Miller's profile. Oh my God, he's done this. He went to Cornell. I can find Rachel Premack's whole bio, what she's done. I can find an extra like, oh, okay, so these guys are credentialed journalists. So it's just, carriers need marketing. Marketing can help win this.
So a really good company to like help with that is OTR Solutions. They were a sponsor of ours when I had the podcast for Back the Truck Up. And if you're like a small wannabe carrier operation and you want to be able to like have like a full website and like a professional email address and all that stuff, they take care of all that for you. And I wish more guys knew about that, because if I had known that when I was on the road long enough that like I kind of knew the ins and outs of trucking, but I also never wanted to like have to deal with all the hassles of being an owner operator. And had I known that like a company like OTR Solutions existed, I probably would have like bought a truck and like let them do all the heavy lifting and just let me focus on driving and keeping the wheels turning profitably.
And
looks
to
like
that point, but yeah, to that point, so I was watching a video from someone that posted on LinkedIn, and he was saying that he went to a conference in LA, and everyone recognized him because he posts a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, not in logistics related, but overall, he's saying that most of his business comes just because people know him. They come up to him and because they recognize his face from his posts. And I have the same way, where a lot of our sponsors for Freight Caviar, I mean, they recognize me at a conference and they walk up to me, and then we get the ball rolling on a potential sponsorship. And funny enough, actually, OTR Solutions is now a sponsor of ours, and Grace from OTR walked up to me at TIA, and that's how we got the ball rolling. And the same thing would go for finding a shipper. If you're a trucking company and you want to potentially get shippers or even brokerages attention, you got to post content. Everyone's scrolling, and whether it's TikTok, LinkedIn, Twitter, if you get your name out there and you have some kind of brand recognition, it's a lot easier to win business. So definitely focus on that.
Yeah, that'd be good. That would be a good link in the chain to like connect. Like if they have clients of theirs that are carriers or drivers or whatever, and they have like the shippers that they want to use, have them like say like, hey, shippers, these are our drivers you're using. Go ahead and put their names and faces on your website.
But in the meantime, though, and this is true because there is a job and there's work that needs to be done at the government level, especially in the congressional level, and becoming a member of an organization like CDL Drivers Unlimited. We are in contact with members of Congress on the Transportation Committee, we're in contact with people like Senator Ted Cruz and people on his staff, and the consistency. The only way to get things done in Washington is to get organized and be consistent. That's the only way, because the government, we all know, it moves slow. They're not as they're not as robust, or they're not as limber as a small business could be, or as people like us can be. And to consistently stay organized and really and show involvement, because anytime you talk to a politician, they will all say and all admit they like hearing from constituents. It kind of humanizes them, I think. And this is what I think, because politicians we sometimes think of as robots. But like when they genuinely enjoy listening to real constituents, and when it's an organization that's not just some lobbying firm like the ATA, they enjoy that. And if a consistent organization can really beat down their doors and drums on these things, eventually some things will change. You just need to stay in constant contact with them and not give up. You have to basically not give up doing this, whether or not, PBJ, you're not, necessarily working as a freight broker, but you're still in on this. Like, you're still in this fight. So no matter where you're going, Gord, wherever you happen to go professionally, like, it's just the managing of staying consistent, being in on this and keeping the conversation going, especially with branding and stuff like that. And then good journalism, like what Clarissa's got going on, that consistency, I think, will end up winning out.
All right. So are we getting close to wrapping up here? Have we solved all the problems?
I just had one question for Clarissa. Like, will a lot of these scammers, or like the Glendale gang guys, is it the fact that it's so easy to open up a business that makes them able to operate? Like, how do we make it so difficult to like close one operation down and pop up a new one overnight to stop that scam from happening, but also not grind the rest of the economy to a screeching halt?
I don't know. And I think whoever can figure it out is way smarter than I am. But, when you have a network that's buying and selling MC numbers, or CDL licenses of people that maybe go back to Armenia, Ukraine, Serbia, there's a whole other, things at play where, that they, have, for years, when DAT was like starting to crack down on companies or the bad actors that were posting loads, that, then there was this black market of hey, can I buy your MC number for $200 or $2,000? And so that was happening. And the fact that, what they do is, they have their own, some of their ex-employees say they have their own load board that understand their system, that they have the ins and outs among players in these larger load, boards that, which is how they remain, active on there. And, that they have set up this training system and that, that where they are still making money, but it's at the detriment of, a lot of good carriers out there that want to, that get screwed, and they're like, hey, player's going to play. I'm going to keep, doing this until somebody stops me. But I always think that the IRS could have a big hand in stopping this by looking at the UCC liens on these companies
that's kind of
they are active for a year, and
that's what I'm wondering. Like, what
sorry.
level of fraud does this thing have to like balloon up to before like the eye of the government like starts to notice? Like, I'm looking at like all these web lines connected and everything, and I'm thinking RICO. Why have they not had why hasn't the FBI stepped in with a big fat RICO case and just closed these guys down yesterday?
I had an incident, and it's been maybe 2 years ago, with a driver that came over from Russia and started working for a Ukrainian company here in the U.S. And and he ended up, well, they paid for his all of the training. They put him up in an apartment. They provided him a housing, but it was all deducted from his pay, so that he wasn't earning anything. So he at the time, it was an auto hauler. He was working doing hot shot auto hauls, and so he drove his 350-ton pickup truck with a GMC SUV onto Trump Tower hotel in Chicago with help. This company, or I don't even remember the exact wordage, but it was like, this company is bad, and like they are a bad company, and thinking that would get the attention of the FBI, of all these different agencies, but nobody wants to take the ball. I have sources at the FBI that are aware of this, but it's just, the money is going out of the country at such a fast that they can't track. They don't have the resources to track it back. The IRS, I have sources there that said the same thing. FMCSA, is the regulatory agency, but yet, they can put rule and regs in place, but as far as the enforcement, they can, maybe, shut down a carrier, but it takes years, like of building an investigation before that even occurs. And so at all levels, everybody wants somebody else to take the lead on this. And
that's what's so crazy to me is like the way that like a lot of these organizations operate is like, that's how you build your career. Is like, you have a nice big fat juicy case where you say, I was the one who like built the case and took down mob boss XYZ. Like if you're, I have no idea how many FBI agents are going to be listening to this, but if you're an FBI agent and you never want to buy another beer for the rest of your life, take down one of these organized crime rings, and every truck driver in the U.S. you'll never pay for another beer ever. But every truck driver will pick up the tab for you.
The FMCSA needs to step in with, like I said, somebody all of this episode needs to get in front of them, because the FMCSA needs to realize that this is the true issue of safety, and that there needs to be barriers to entry, and that they can't continue to lower the barriers to entry into this down to the level of how CDLs are given out. Because if just the fact that the idea of toying around 18-year-olds going interstate and all this stuff, everything that Gord harps on this show and that we all talk about, the FMCSA needs to start implementing barriers to entry. Even something as a hammer, like brokers getting a TWIC card, it ends tomorrow.
Yeah, the problem with the FMCSA and the rest of the government and the other people involved in administering this industry is that they believe their own lies. They believe in the driver shortage narrative. they believe that, you can't export drivers' jobs, and everybody else's wages have gone down, and industries have been shipped overseas. And we can't do that with trucking, so we have to chip away at it via other means. It's all unstated, but you can see it in how they act. And until that changes, like, who knows? We're just throwing things against the wall. But yeah, I want to wrap this up. And my final parting thought on this is, they have the Buy American campaigns that have been around since forever. Buy US built this and American built that. I say ship American. Do your due diligence. Find out how long a company's been operating in the United States. I don't care if they're immigrants from other countries, but if they've been here a long time, they got their citizenship or a green card like I have, and they're here and they are for building something up in the United States and helping the American economy, that will come through in how they operate, in the aesthetic they put off, the kind of equipment they run. They have a website. They're proud of what they do. They'll have no problem meeting you in person. So ship American. Mike Lombard, where can people find you?
Hey, you guys can find me everywhere, running around, acting a fool, crazy myself, doing push-ups in front of my truck at Lombard Trucking. And also, if you're ever interested in turning around, your health and fitness, I work as an advisor on the First Form app. Go ahead and download that, and I can help coach you on getting healthy. But you can find me everywhere at Lombard Trucking.
All right, Paul Bernard Jaroslawski, how do people find you, sir?
FreightCaviar.com. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, all at Freight Caviar. Also YouTube, Freight Caviar. We have a podcast that comes out every week. And then subscribe to our newsletter. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we come out with the latest freight broker news and entertainment. And that's free.
All right, Clarissa Hawes.
You can find me at FreightWaves.com. It's CHawes@FreightWaves.com, and on X or Twitter it's Cage_writer. So you can find me there as well. And I'm on LinkedIn and wherever, yes, I'm always looking for leads, and some people I can help, some people I'm working on helping or trying to help. But yes, that's where you can find me.
Justin Martin, Super Trucker.
Exactly. You can find me on Twitter at Super Trucker. I promise the name is ironic. No better word than any other steering wheel holder out there. I'm always jealous of Freight Caviar. That is such a great branding name, man. I think I mentioned that before.
Thanks, Justin.
And then also I run the What the Truck Twitter at FW What the Truck. Same for TikTok as well.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for bringing your expertise and for donating your time to this little project. I really appreciate it. Solutions abound if we're willing to discuss the problem. And again, thank you all very much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Gord.
All right, way of the road.